7 years after CIA intelligence analyst Noah Beckett vanished without a trace from Langley, a burning fragment of Soviet surveillance satellite crashes into Elise Navarro's Oregon wheat field. The twisted metal hull, still radiating heat from atmospheric re-entry, conceals more than space junk and scorch marks. Buried deep within its core lies a waterproof case containing classified microfilm, handwritten notes, and Noah's final intelligence report, all bearing October 1990 timestamps from the week he disappeared. The documents expose Project Chiaroscuro, a covert domestic wiretapping operation that transformed ordinary American phone calls into government intelligence. But more importantly, they contain Noah's desperate final message, the names of the people who were hunting him, and his growing certainty that he wouldn't survive to expose them. As Pacific Northwest fog shrouds the Willamette Valley, Elise realizes she's holding either the key to solving a 7-year-old murder or the evidence that will make her the next victim. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Willamette Valley stretched endlessly before Elise Navarro as she approached the twisted metal that had shattered her quiet farming life. At 46, she carried herself with the measured confidence of someone who'd spent a decade tracking Soviet satellites before trading military fatigues for work boots and flannel. 7 years of farming had weathered her hands, but sharpened her instincts. The same analytical mind that once monitored threats from space now recognized that whatever had fallen from the sky wasn't ordinary debris. The satellite fragment lay embedded 3 feet into the dark Oregon soil, a mass of heat-scarred metal roughly the size of a washing machine. Cyrillic markings confirmed her initial assessment: Soviet technology, probably launched in the mid-80s. But the precision of its impact troubled her. Natural satellite decay scattered debris across hundreds of miles. This fragment had fallen with purpose, as if someone had calculated exactly where it would land. Using a crowbar from her tool shed, she pried at a seam that didn't match the impact damage. The metal gave way with a grinding screech, revealing layers of heat-resistant foam protecting a waterproof aluminum case. Her hands trembled as she lifted it free. During her years at NORAD, she'd handled similar containers carrying classified satellite imagery. This case bore no external markings, except a stamped date, October 15th, 1990. The combination lock clicked open when she tried the date sequence. Inside, microfilm canisters lay nestled beside handwritten surveillance logs, photographs of classified documents, and a thick manila folder labeled Project Chiaroscuro, Final Report. But it was the personal letter on top that made her pulse quicken. Handwritten pages addressed to whoever finds this, signed by someone named Noah Beckett. If you're reading this, then my contingency plan worked, the letter began in careful script. They're going to kill me, probably within the next 48 hours. I know too much about Project Chiaroscuro, and too many powerful people have too much to lose if the truth comes out. I've documented everything: the illegal surveillance, the domestic spying, the constitutional violations. But more importantly, I've identified the people responsible. Dr. Marcus Hall at CIA Legal Counsel, someone called Shepard who runs the entire operation, and Captain Jaya Rao of Helios Defense, the private contractor they use when they need people to disappear permanently. Elise's military training kicked in as she absorbed the implications. This wasn't just evidence of government wrongdoing. It was a dead man's testimony about his own murder, preserved in orbit for 7 years until cosmic mechanics brought it back to Earth. Noah's personnel file showed a serious-faced man in his early 30s with intelligent eyes and prematurely gray hair. Recruited from MIT in 1985, specializing in signals intelligence. Performance reviews were exemplary until the final entry, dated October 10, 1990. Subject has been requesting access to classified domestic operations outside his clearance level. Recommend immediate psychological evaluation and potential security review. His handwritten analysis told a chilling story. Project Chiaroscuro had begun as legitimate counterintelligence against Soviet agents, but had metastasized into massive domestic surveillance. By 1990, the program was processing 50,000 phone conversations daily, creating psychological profiles on American citizens, flagging anyone who criticized government policies. The technical specifications were staggering: voice recognition software, keyword analysis, comprehensive files on journalists, activists, and political opponents. But NOAA's most damning discovery was contained in a memo marked "Eyes Only," signed by someone identified as Shepard. Phase 3 implementation will expand monitoring to all major telecommunications hubs nationwide. Within 18 months, we will have capability to monitor virtually every phone call in America. Congressional oversight remains unaware and must remain so. Potential whistleblowers will be handled through existing asset management protocols. NOAA had decoded the euphemism. People who threatened the program would be eliminated. His final report, dated October 14, 1990, was both a detailed indictment and a desperate plea. I have attempted to report these constitutional violations through proper channels. My supervisors have ignored my concerns. My security clearance is being revoked, and I have credible intelligence that my life is in danger. If something happens to me, this evidence must reach congressional oversight committees. The American people must know that their government is spying on them without warrants, without oversight, without any legal authority whatsoever. The last entry was prophetic. Rebecca, if you're reading this, don't trust anyone at the agency. They killed me to protect their secrets. But the truth has a way of surfacing. Find someone who can't be bought or intimidated. Find someone who believes in the Constitution more than their career. Make them listen. A sound from the access road interrupted her reading. A black sedan with government plates was approaching slowly. Through 7 years of quiet farming, she'd almost forgotten the paranoid vigilance that had kept her alive during intelligence work. But as she watched 2 men in dark suits emerge from the vehicle, muscle memory kicked in with crystalline clarity. Inside the house, 17-year-old Oliver was hunched over his ham radio setup, scanning frequencies with the obsessive focus that had filled the void left by his father's death 3 years earlier. Since the training accident that had taken his Air Force pilot father, the boy had retreated into electronics and radio communications, finding comfort in the predictable logic of technology. "Mom," he called as she entered, clutching the aluminum case. "You need to hear this. I've been monitoring federal emergency frequencies since that thing crashed, and there's some serious chatter. Multiple agencies, encrypted channels, all focused on our coordinates. They're calling it Operation Recovery, and they're mobilizing resources like this is some kind of major security incident." Before she could respond, the phone rang. The caller ID showed only blocked number, but something about the timing made her answer immediately. Elise Navarro. The voice was female, professional, but strained with 7 years of desperate searching. "Yes, my name is Rebecca Beckett. I'm a journalist from Portland, and I believe you may have found something that belonged to my brother, Noah Beckett. He disappeared from the CIA 7 years ago, and I've never stopped looking for answers." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. "How did you know to call me? I've been monitoring federal emergency frequencies since 1990, waiting for any mention of Project Chiaroscuro or Noah's name. This morning, encrypted transmissions started flooding the airwaves, all focused on your location. I think my brother's evidence just fell out of the sky, and the people who killed him are about to come looking for it." Through the window, Elise watched the federal agents examining the crash site with professional interest. They weren't routine debris recovery specialists. Their movements suggested tactical training and familiarity with classified materials. More concerning, Additional vehicles were approaching from multiple directions. "Rebecca," she said, "I found your brother's final report, and I found his letter to you. He knew they were going to kill him." The silence on the phone stretched for long seconds before Rebecca's voice returned, thick with emotion. "What did he say?" "He said don't trust anyone at the agency. He said they killed him to protect their secrets. And he said the truth has a way of surfacing." Elise paused, watching more government vehicles arrive. "I think it just did. Are you willing to help me find out what really happened to Noah?" Looking at Oliver, who was monitoring tactical frequencies with the intensity of someone tracking incoming missiles, Elise felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. She could surrender Noah's evidence, return to her quiet farming life, and pretend none of this had happened. Or she could honor the trust of a dead whistleblower and risk everything to discover the truth about his murder. The federal agents were walking toward her house with the measured pace of professionals conducting official business. But Noah's letter had warned her about trusting official channels. If she was going to learn what really happened to him, she'd have to do it outside the system that had killed him. "I'll help you find the truth about your brother," she told Rebecca. "But we need to move fast. They're already here." Rebecca Beckett arrived at the farm like a woman possessed, her pickup truck kicking up dust clouds as she raced down the access road past the federal agents, who were still examining the crash site. At 38, she carried herself with the determined energy of someone who'd spent 7 years refusing to accept easy answers about her brother's disappearance. Her auburn hair whipped in the Oregon wind as she emerged from the truck, press credentials swinging from a lanyard and a canvas bag full of files slung over her shoulder. The federal agents moved to intercept her, but Rebecca brushed past them with the dismissive confidence of someone who'd spent years confronting bureaucratic obstruction. She'd learned that hesitation invited authority figures to establish control, while bold action often caught them off guard. "Miss Navarro," she called out, striding across the farmyard. "I'm Rebecca Beckett. We need to talk immediately, before those government suits decide to make this conversation impossible." The resemblance to Noah was unmistakable. The same intelligent eyes, the same determined jawline, the same quality of restless energy that suggested a mind constantly analyzing patterns and connections. But where Noah's CIA photograph had shown someone trying to work within the system, Rebecca radiated the controlled fury of someone who'd been fighting that system from the outside. Inside the house, she spread her own files across the kitchen table. 7 years of investigation notes, Freedom of Information Act requests, interview transcripts, and surveillance photographs that painted a comprehensive picture of her obsessive search for answers about Noah's fate. The official story is that Noah suffered a psychological breakdown and walked away from his job, she began, opening a thick folder labeled Disappearance, October 1990. According to his supervisors, he'd been acting paranoid and erratic for weeks before he vanished. They claim he simply abandoned his post and disappeared, probably to avoid a psychiatric evaluation. Oliver looked up from his radio equipment, his 17-year-old face reflecting skepticism that adults often lost. "But you don't believe that. Noah never had a sick day in his life. He was methodical, brilliant, and completely dedicated to his work. The idea that he'd just walk away from everything made no sense." Rebecca pulled out a timeline she'd constructed with obsessive detail. But more importantly, the evidence doesn't support their story. She laid out photographs of Noah's apartment as it had been found after his disappearance. Clothes still in closets, food in the refrigerator, his car parked in the CIA lot with personal belongings still inside. If someone's planning to disappear voluntarily, they take things with them. Photographs, mementos, money. Noah left behind everything that mattered to him, including this. She showed them a photograph of Noah's desk at Langley, taken by a sympathetic colleague before security cleared it out. In the center sat a framed picture of Rebecca and Noah at Christmas 1989, both of them smiling beside a tree that represented their first holiday together since their parents' deaths. "He loved that photograph," Rebecca said softly. "It was the only personal item he kept at work. Noah would never have left it behind voluntarily." Elise studied the timeline, her analytical mind processing the sequence of events that had led to Noah's disappearance. "What about the psychological evaluation they mentioned? Did that actually happen?" "That's where the story gets interesting." Rebecca pulled out a stack of documents obtained through years of FOIA litigation. The evaluation was ordered by Dr. Marcus Hall from CIA legal counsel on October 10, 1990. But Noah never reported for it. He disappeared on October 15th, the day it was scheduled. The name Marcus Hall triggered recognition from Noah's letter. Dr. Hall, one of the people Noah had identified as being involved in his murder. The psychological evaluation hadn't been legitimate medical intervention. It had been a trap. "I spent 3 years trying to find the psychiatrist who was supposed to conduct the evaluation," Rebecca continued. "Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, supposedly a contractor with security clearance for classified cases. But Dr. Morrison doesn't exist. The address on her contract leads to an empty office building. Her medical credentials are fabricated. Her security clearance was issued to a fictitious person." The implications were chilling. Noah's supervisors had ordered him to report for a psychological evaluation with a non-existent doctor at a fake address. It was an elaborate setup designed to isolate him from the safety of CIA headquarters and place him in a location where he could be eliminated without witnesses. Oliver's radio crackled with encrypted transmissions that added urgency to their investigation. "Mom, they're coordinating something big out there. I'm hearing references to asset recovery and witness management. They're not just here for the satellite debris." Through the window, they could see federal agents establishing a wider perimeter around the property, while additional vehicles arrived from multiple directions. The debris recovery was becoming a major operation, involving resources that seemed disproportionate to a simple satellite crash. Rebecca was photographing Noah's documents with professional efficiency, working with the focused intensity of someone who'd been waiting 7 years for this moment. "After I figured out the fake evaluation, I started investigating everyone connected to Noah's final weeks. That's when I discovered the pattern." She spread out surveillance photographs and employment records, showing the fates of other people who'd had contact with Noah during his final investigation of Project Chiaroscuro. Dr. James Patterson, NSA cryptographer who'd been sharing information with Noah about domestic surveillance capabilities, died in a car accident 6 weeks after Noah disappeared. Sarah Martinez, FBI liaison who'd been helping Noah document constitutional violations, killed in a home invasion that took nothing valuable. Michael Torres, congressional staffer who'd agreed to brief oversight committee members about Noah's findings. Apparent suicide 3 months later. The pattern was unmistakable. A systematic elimination of everyone who might have corroborated Noah's evidence or continued his investigation. The car accidents, home invasions, and suicides had been carefully staged to look like random violence or personal tragedies. 12 people, Rebecca continued, her voice carrying the weight of 7 years of investigation. 12 people who had knowledge of Project Chiaroscuro or contact with Noah during his final weeks, all dead within 8 months of his disappearance. The statistical probability of that being coincidental is essentially 0. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Elise felt the pieces of a massive conspiracy clicking into place. Noah hadn't just stumbled onto a surveillance program. He'd uncovered an entire apparatus for eliminating threats to that program. His letter had been accurate. They'd killed him, and then they'd systematically eliminated everyone else who might have exposed the truth. "But you survived," Oliver observed. "If they were killing everyone connected to Noah, why are you still alive?" Rebecca's smile held no warmth. because they needed someone to discredit. A grieving sister making wild accusations about government murder plots. Without evidence, without witnesses, I was just another conspiracy theorist. I served their purposes better alive and discredited than dead and martyred. She pulled out newspaper clippings and magazine articles that showed how her 7-year investigation had been portrayed in mainstream media. Sister's obsession. Woman claims government murdered brother. The truth is out there. Journalists' conspiracy theories about CIA. When grief becomes delusion. Family member won't accept brother's mental breakdown. They didn't need to kill me, she said bitterly. They just needed to make sure nobody believed me. And it worked. For 7 years, I've been the crazy sister who couldn't accept that her brilliant brother had suffered a psychological collapse. But Noah's satellite-preserved evidence changed everything. The documents he'd hidden provided independent corroboration of Rebecca's 7-year investigation, transforming her from a discredited conspiracy theorist into a journalist whose research had been vindicated by documentary proof. Through the window, they could see the federal agents receiving new instructions through their radio equipment. Their body language suggested tactical preparation rather than routine evidence collection. Rebecca, Elise said, Noah's letter mentioned 3 specific people. Dr. Marcus Hall at CIA Legal Counsel, someone called Shepard, who runs the operation, and Captain Jaya Rao of Helios Defense. Do any of those names match your investigation? Rebecca's expression hardened with recognition. Dr. Hall authorized the fake psychological evaluation that was supposed to isolate Noah. I've been trying to connect him to my brother's disappearance for years, but he's protected by CIA legal immunity. As for Shepard, that's a codename I've encountered in other cases, always associated with people who disappear after exposing government wrongdoing. She paused, studying the federal agents outside who were coordinating with increasing urgency. But Captain Rao is new information. Helios Defense is a private military contractor that specializes in what they call asset protection services. If Noah identified her specifically, it means she was probably the one who actually carried out his murder. The radio crackled with Oliver's voice, reporting tactical communications that made their situation increasingly dangerous. Mom, they're bringing in specialized equipment. I'm hearing references to hazardous material containment and emergency protocols. They're going to manufacture some kind of crisis to justify clearing the area. Rebecca was already moving toward the back door, Noah's evidence secured in her canvas bag. We need to get this information to people who can't be intimidated or bought. Congressional investigators, federal prosecutors, journalists with national platforms. But first, we need to get off this property before they decide we're too dangerous to leave alive. Standing in her kitchen with Noah's 7-year-old testimony spread across the table and federal agents establishing tactical positions outside, Elise realized they'd moved beyond simple evidence preservation. They were now active participants in solving a murder that powerful people had worked 7 years to conceal. The satellite crash had been more than a cosmic accident. It was Noah Beckett's final message, delivered from beyond the grave to the one person who'd never stopped searching for the truth about his fate. And now that message was about to transform Rebecca's 7-year quest from lonely obsession into active criminal investigation. The first attempt to silence them came disguised as bureaucratic procedure. Agent Coleman approached the house with the practiced courtesy of someone accustomed to getting compliance through implied authority rather than legal compulsion. Behind him, Agent Martinez was coordinating with additional personnel who were arriving with equipment that had nothing to do with satellite debris recovery. "Miss Navarro, Miss Beckett," Coleman said with professional politeness. "I'm Agent Coleman, Department of Defense. We need to secure any materials that may have been recovered from the aerospace incident. For national security reasons, we're establishing a temporary exclusion zone while our specialists assess potential hazards." It was a clever approach. Create a plausible emergency that justified removing witnesses while classified evidence was retrieved and destroyed. But Rebecca had seen these tactics before during her 7-year investigation. "Agent Coleman," she replied, pulling out her press credentials and digital recorder. "I'm Rebecca Beckett, investigative journalist. This is private property, and Miss Navarro has invited me here as her guest. Unless you have a warrant, you have no authority to establish exclusion zones or seize property." Coleman's professional mask slipped slightly as he recognized that this wouldn't be as simple as intimidating isolated civilians. "Ma'am, we have reason to believe that the recovered materials may contain hazardous substances that pose a public health risk. We are authorized under emergency protocols to secure the area until proper testing can be conducted." Through the window, Elise could see the real operation unfolding. Tactical teams establishing perimeter positions, communications equipment being deployed, and what looked like a mobile command post arriving from the south. The hazardous materials story was cover for a military-style operation designed to retrieve Noah's evidence and eliminate anyone who'd seen it. Oliver's radio provided a real-time intelligence picture that revealed the scope of what they were facing. "Mom, I'm monitoring tactical frequencies from at least 4 different agencies: FBI, CIA, NSA, and something called Helios Defense. They're coordinating like this is a major counterterrorism operation." The mention of Helios Defense sent a chill through everyone in the room. Noah's letter had specifically identified Captain Jaya Rao of that organization as being involved in his murder. If Helios contractors were on site, it meant the people who'd killed Noah were preparing to finish what they'd started 7 years earlier. Rebecca was photographing documents with urgent efficiency while broadcasting live updates on multiple frequencies that Oliver had configured for maximum coverage. "This is Rebecca Beckett reporting from Oregon, where federal agents are attempting to seize evidence related to the 1990 disappearance of CIA analyst Noah Beckett. 7 years ago, my brother vanished after discovering illegal domestic surveillance programs. Today, his evidence fell from the sky, and the people who killed him are trying to bury it again." Her broadcast was being picked up by ham radio operators, emergency services, and news organizations across the Pacific Northwest. What had begun as a quiet containment operation was rapidly becoming a public confrontation between government secrecy and democratic accountability. Agent Coleman was speaking urgently into his radio, coordinating with superiors who were watching their operational security deteriorate in real time. The arrival of media attention meant they could no longer handle this quietly, and every tactical decision would be scrutinized by public observers. "Miss Beckett," Coleman said with barely concealed frustration, "you're interfering with a federal security operation. Broadcasting classified information on open frequencies constitutes a serious breach of national security protocols." "What classified information?" Rebecca demanded. "The fact that my brother was murdered for exposing illegal surveillance? The fact that your people have been covering it up for 7 years? Or the fact that you're using military contractors against American civilians?" She held up Noah's letter, reading directly from his final testimony. "They're going to kill me, probably within the next 48 hours. Dr. Marcus Hall at CIA Legal Counsel, someone called Shepard who runs the entire operation, and Captain Jaya Rao of Helios Defense, the private contractor they use when they need people to disappear permanently." The effect was immediate and devastating. Coleman's professional composure cracked as he realized that Noah's evidence contained specific names and operational details that could destroy careers and trigger criminal prosecutions. This wasn't just about suppressing a surveillance program. It was about covering up a series of murders. Through Oliver's radio monitoring, they could hear the panic spreading through government communications. Emergency meetings being called, legal consultations being requested, and what sounded like orders to escalate the operation before more evidence could be broadcast. But Rebecca's most damaging revelation was yet to come. "I've spent 7 years documenting the systematic elimination of everyone connected to my brother's investigation. 12 people dead within 8 months of his disappearance, all staged to look like accidents, crimes, or suicides. But Noah's evidence provides the missing piece: the identity of the private contractor responsible for these murders. She opened her canvas bag and pulled out surveillance photographs she'd obtained through years of investigation. Images of Captain Jaya Rao conducting reconnaissance on several of the people who'd later died under suspicious circumstances. Captain Rao was photographed outside Dr. James Patterson's house 3 days before his fatal car accident. She was seen near Sarah Martinez's apartment the week before the home invasion that killed her, and she was documented meeting with Michael Torres just 2 weeks before his supposed suicide. The photographs were devastating evidence that connected Noah's murder to a broader assassination program targeting anyone who threatened Project Chiaroscuro. Rebecca had spent 7 years collecting pieces of a puzzle that Noah's satellite-preserved testimony finally completed. Oliver's radio crackled with new transmissions that revealed how quickly the situation was escalating. "Mom, they're implementing something called Protocol 7. I'm hearing references to asset termination and permanent containment measures. They're not planning to arrest us. They're planning to kill us." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Outside, specialized teams were arriving with equipment that had nothing to do with debris recovery or hazardous materials. These were elimination specialists, trained to handle situations where normal legal processes were deemed insufficient. But Rebecca's broadcast had created a protective umbrella of public attention that made violence politically costly. News organizations were picking up her story, congressional offices were demanding briefings, and ham radio operators across the country were relaying her reports to mainstream media outlets. "Agent Coleman," Elise said, with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent years in military intelligence, "you have a choice to make. You can continue following orders from people who murdered American citizens to protect illegal surveillance programs, or you can start following the Constitution you swore to defend." Coleman's response revealed the moral conflict that was tearing through government personnel as Noah's evidence exposed the true nature of what they'd been ordered to protect. "Miss Navarro, you don't understand the complexities involved here. Some operations require difficult decisions to protect national security." "Whose national security?" Oliver demanded with the moral clarity that came from being too young to accept bureaucratic rationalizations. "The American people's security, or the security of officials who break the law?" Through the window, they could see Captain Jaya Rao arriving in a convoy of black SUVs, her team moving with the disciplined precision of military professionals rather than federal agents. At 42, she commanded immediate respect through bearing alone, the kind of presence that came from leading soldiers in combat rather than conducting bureaucratic operations. But something in Rao's demeanor suggested internal conflict. Her movements carried the reluctant professionalism of someone following orders she didn't entirely agree with, and her eyes held the troubled expression of a soldier who'd been asked to turn her skills against American civilians. Rebecca recognized her immediately from years of surveillance photographs. "Captain Rao," she called out as the Helios contractor approached the house, "I'm Rebecca Beckett, Noah's sister. I know what you did to my brother, and I know about the other people you've killed to protect Project Chiaroscuro." For just a moment, Rao's professional mask slipped, revealing something that might have been regret or shame. But she recovered quickly, her military training asserting control over whatever emotions she might have been feeling. "Miss Beckett," Rao said with quiet authority, "I understand your grief, but you're making accusations based on incomplete information. Your brother's case was thoroughly investigated, and there's no evidence of wrongdoing by any personnel." "No evidence?" Rebecca pulled out Noah's letter and read directly from his final testimony. "Captain Jaya Rao of Helios Defense, the private contractor they use when they need people to disappear permanently." The words hung in the air like an accusation from beyond the grave. Noah had identified his killer by name, preserved his testimony in orbit, and waited 7 years for cosmic mechanics to deliver it to someone who could demand justice. Standing in her farmhouse with federal agents outside and a private military contractor at her door, Elise realized they'd moved beyond evidence preservation or government accountability. They were now witnesses to a confrontation between a dead man's testimony and the living people who'd murdered him to protect their secrets. The satellite that had fallen from the sky was revealing itself as Noah Beckett's final investigation, a 7-year journey through space that had brought his evidence back to Earth at exactly the moment when it could finally expose the truth about his fate. Captain Jaya Rao stood in the doorway with her weapon drawn but not raised, caught between conflicting loyalties that represented the fundamental crisis of conscience Noah Beckett's evidence had created. Her orders were clear: secure the classified materials and eliminate any witnesses who could threaten ongoing operations. But facing Rebecca Beckett, the sister who'd spent 7 years searching for answers about her brother's murder, Rao found herself confronting the human cost of decisions she'd made in the name of national security. "Miss Beckett," she said with careful professionalism, "I need you to understand that some operations require actions that can't be explained through normal legal frameworks. Your brother stumbled onto information that could have compromised sources and methods, endangering lives and national security interests." Rebecca's response carried 7 years of grief and fury. "My brother stumbled onto evidence that the government was illegally spying on American citizens. The only lives endangered were those of officials who were violating their oaths and breaking federal law." Rao's expression tightened, revealing the internal conflict between duty and conscience that had been building since she'd received her current orders. "Miss Beckett, you're viewing this situation through the lens of personal loss. But intelligence operations involve complexities that civilians can't fully understand." "Then explain them to me," Rebecca demanded. "Explain how murdering my brother protected national security. Explain how killing 12 other people who might have corroborated his evidence served American interests. Explain how using private military contractors to assassinate American citizens upholds the Constitution you swore to defend." For the first time since her arrival, Rao's professional composure cracked slightly. The systematic nature of the assassination program was something she'd tried not to think about during the 7 years since Noah's elimination. Each individual operation had been justified through national security rationales and compartmentalized information, but Rebecca's investigation had connected them into a pattern that was impossible to rationalize. Oliver's radio provided real-time intelligence about the broader operation unfolding around them. "Mom, I'm monitoring communications from multiple agencies, and there's serious confusion about command authority. Some people are receiving orders to stand down, while others are being told to proceed with asset elimination. It sounds like there's a battle going on at higher levels about how to handle this." The confusion reflected the unprecedented nature of the situation. For 7 years, the cover-up of Noah's murder had operated through established channels and clear hierarchies. But the satellite crash had created a public crisis that was forcing different parts of the government to confront the reality of what they'd been protecting. Elise studied Rao's face, recognizing the signs of someone wrestling with moral conflict. During her military career, she'd seen the expression before: professional soldiers asked to execute orders that violated their deeper understanding of duty and honor. "Captain," she said quietly, "you don't strike me as someone who became a soldier to murder American citizens. What happened to change that?" Rao's response revealed layers of rationalization and institutional pressure that had gradually corrupted her original sense of mission. "I joined the military to protect my country from its enemies. When I transitioned to private contracting, I was told that some threats to national security couldn't be handled through conventional legal processes. I was assured that the operations I conducted were authorized at the highest levels and essential for protecting American lives." "Whose assurance?" Rebecca pressed. Who convinced you that murdering my brother was protecting American lives? Dr. Marcus Hall provided the legal framework and operational justification. He explained that NOAA had compromised ongoing intelligence operations and was threatening to expose sources and methods that had taken years to develop. He said that containing the damage required exceptional measures. Rebecca pulled out her files on Dr. Hall, 7 years of investigation that had documented his role in multiple cover-ups and illegal operations. Dr. Hall has been authorizing exceptional measures for over a decade. According to my research, he's provided legal justification for domestic surveillance, illegal detention, torture, and assassination programs that violate every principle of constitutional government. She spread out organizational charts and classified documents that showed Hall's central role in post-Cold War intelligence operations that had gradually expanded beyond any legal authority. He's not protecting national security. He's protecting his own power and the institutional interests of agencies that have grown beyond democratic control. Rao was studying the documents with growing recognition and what appeared to be mounting horror. Some of these operations, I was told they involved foreign nationals or imminent terrorist threats. I was never told about domestic surveillance or systematic elimination of American whistleblowers. It was the classic pattern of compartmentalized operations, individual operatives given partial information and plausible justifications, while the broader conspiracy remained hidden from anyone except the highest levels of leadership. Oliver's radio crackled with transmissions that revealed how the situation was evolving in real time. Captain Rao, I'm monitoring communications from your command structure, and it sounds like some people are ordering you to proceed with elimination protocols, while others are telling you to abort the mission pending review by congressional oversight. Rao's earpiece was providing her with the same conflicting information, creating a moment of tactical uncertainty that reflected the broader institutional crisis NOAA's evidence had triggered. The machinery of official secrecy was turning against itself as different parts of the government realized the legal and political implications of the cover-up. Captain, Rebecca said, recognizing the moment of moral choice that was playing out, you have an opportunity to make a different decision than you made 7 years ago. You can continue following orders from people who lied to you about the nature of your mission, or you can help us get justice for the people you were manipulated into killing. Rao's response came after a long pause, her voice carrying the weight of 7 years of suppressed conscience. Miss Beckett, if what you're saying is true, if I was deceived about the legal authority and national security justification for these operations, then I've spent 7 years as an assassin rather than a soldier. That's exactly what you've been, Rebecca replied without mercy. But you can choose to be something different starting right now. Through the window, they could see Rao's team maintaining tactical positions, while obviously confused about their mission parameters. Professional soldiers trained for clear objectives and defined rules of engagement. They were struggling to adapt to a situation where political considerations were overriding military doctrine. Dr. Marcus Hall's arrival in a government helicopter added another layer of complexity to the unfolding crisis. At 55, the longtime CIA counsel carried himself with the polished authority of someone who'd spent decades protecting covert operations from legal scrutiny. But his presence also meant that the situation had escalated to levels where direct intervention by senior officials was deemed necessary. Hall approached the House with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to managing political crises through legal maneuvering and bureaucratic intimidation. His gray suit was perfectly tailored, his demeanor calm and professional, but his eyes held the calculating intelligence of someone assessing threats and planning countermeasures. Captain Rao, he said with quiet authority, I need to speak with you privately about the operational parameters for this mission. But Rebecca intercepted him before he could separate Rao from the witnesses who were documenting her moral transformation. Dr. Hall, I'm Rebecca Beckett, and I believe you knew my brother Noah. He wrote about you extensively in his final report. She held up Noah's letter, reading directly from his testimony. Dr. Marcus Hall at CIA Legal Counsel. He's the one who provides legal justification for operations that have no legal justification. He's the one who authorized my elimination. Hall's professional composure remained intact, but Elise noticed his hands clench slightly, a physical tell that suggested Noah's posthumous accusation had struck home. Miss Beckett, I understand your grief over your brother's disappearance, but you're making serious accusations based on incomplete information and emotional trauma. Incomplete information? Rebecca pulled out 7 years of investigation files. I have documentation of your role in authorizing the fake psychological evaluation that was designed to isolate Noah. I have records of your meetings with Helios defense contractors in the weeks before his disappearance, and I have testimony from multiple sources confirming your involvement in covering up his murder. She spread out organizational charts that showed Hall's central position in a network of illegal operations extending far beyond Project Chiaroscuro. You've been running an assassination program targeting American citizens for over a decade, using private contractors to maintain plausible deniability and legal immunity. Hall's response revealed decades of experience in deflecting accountability through bureaucratic language and institutional authority. Ms. Beckett, intelligence operations involve complex legal frameworks that require specialized knowledge to understand. Your brother was experiencing psychological difficulties that made him unable to properly assess the operations he was investigating. What psychological difficulties? Oliver demanded, with the directness that came from being too young to accept bureaucratic evasions. Noah's personnel file shows exemplary performance reviews right up until he started investigating your illegal surveillance program. Hall's eyes narrowed as he recognized that his standard tactics weren't working against people who'd spent months studying Noah's evidence and connecting it to broader patterns of government wrongdoing. Captain Rao was listening to this exchange with growing recognition of how she'd been manipulated. Dr. Hall, you told me that Noah Beckett was a foreign agent who'd compromised sensitive operations. You said he was working with hostile intelligence services to expose classified programs. Captain, operational security required compartmentalized briefings based on individual need-to-know requirements. Hall replied smoothly. You received the information necessary to complete your mission effectively. You lied to me, Rao said with dawning realization. You made me believe I was eliminating a traitor when I was actually murdering a whistleblower who was trying to expose constitutional violations. It was the moment of moral clarity that Rebecca had been hoping for, the realization that would transform Rao from complicit assassin into witness for the prosecution. Hall was already calculating damage control strategies, his legal training providing him with multiple options for containing the crisis. Captain, I strongly advise you to consider the implications of whatever you're contemplating. Operational details are classified, and unauthorized disclosure constitutes a serious breach of your security obligations. But Rao was already removing her earpiece and holstering her weapon, her decision made through the kind of moral clarity that couldn't be undermined by legal threats or institutional pressure. Dr. Hall, she said, with the quiet authority of someone who'd finally chosen conscience over career, I've spent 7 years following your orders and believing your justifications. I've killed people who were trying to protect the Constitution because you convinced me they were threats to national security. But Noah Beckett's evidence makes it clear that the only threat to national security was the illegal surveillance program you were protecting. She turned to Rebecca with something that might have been the beginning of redemption. Miss Beckett, I can't undo what I did to your brother, but I can help you get justice for him and the other people I was manipulated into killing. Hall's professional mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating strategist beneath. Captain, you're making a decision that will destroy your career and potentially result in criminal prosecution. I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. "My career was destroyed the moment you turned me into an assassin," Rao replied. "The question now is whether I spend the rest of my life trying to atone for what I did, or whether I continue serving people who have no respect for the Constitution I swore to defend." Through Oliver's radio monitoring, they could hear the broader implications of Rao's decision reverberating through government communications. Her willingness to testify about the assassination program was creating panic among officials who'd spent years believing their crimes were protected by classification and compartmentalization. But even as this breakthrough occurred, Elise recognized that they were still in immediate physical danger. Hall's presence meant that senior officials were committed to preventing Noah's evidence from reaching congressional investigators or federal prosecutors, and Rao's defection would only increase their desperation. Standing in her kitchen with a repentant assassin, a grieving sister, and a government lawyer who'd authorized multiple murders, she realized that solving Noah Beckett's case would require surviving the next few hours, while powerful people decided whether to cut their losses or escalate to even more extreme measures. The satellite that had brought Noah's evidence back to Earth was revealing itself as more than a message from a dead whistleblower. It was a test of whether American democracy could confront the darkest aspects of its own intelligence apparatus and emerge with its constitutional principles intact. The crisis reached its turning point when Senator Alana Pierce arrived with congressional investigators and federal marshals, transforming the Navarro farm from an isolated confrontation into the center of the most significant intelligence scandal since Watergate. But it was Oliver's ham radio that provided the revelation that would finally expose the full scope of the conspiracy. "Mom," he said with excitement that cut through the tension, "I've been monitoring encrypted communications all morning, and I just identified the source. Someone with the call sign Shepard has been coordinating the entire operation from Washington, and I managed to triangulate the signal. It's coming from the Senate Intelligence Committee offices." The implication hit everyone simultaneously. Shepard wasn't just a code name for some shadowy intelligence official. It was someone with access to congressional oversight communications and the authority to coordinate between multiple agencies. Someone who could authorize illegal operations while simultaneously protecting them from legislative scrutiny. Rebecca's face went pale as she processed what this meant for her 7-year investigation. If Shepard is operating from Senate Intelligence Committee offices, then Noah wasn't just fighting the intelligence agencies. He was fighting someone who could control congressional oversight. Senator Pierce, who'd been examining Noah's documents with growing alarm, looked up sharply. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Oliver replayed the intercepted communications, his amateur equipment providing crystal-clear audio of coordination between CIA, NSA, FBI, and Helios defense personnel. The voice identified as Shepard carried unmistakable authority, issuing orders that multiple agencies were following without question. "Shepard to all units," the recording played. "Congressional oversight is compromised. Senator Pierce's investigation must be contained through any means necessary. Asset elimination is authorized if containment fails." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Someone with access to Senate Intelligence Committee facilities was ordering the assassination of a sitting senator to protect the cover-up of Noah's murder. Pierce's expression transformed from professional concern to personal outrage. "Someone in my own committee is coordinating with intelligence agencies to obstruct my investigation and potentially eliminate me. This isn't just about covering up past crimes. It's about preventing democratic oversight." Captain Rao was studying the tactical communications with professional analysis, her military experience providing insights into the operational structure being revealed. The coordination patterns suggest someone with authority over both intelligence operations and congressional processes. They're able to issue orders to field operatives while simultaneously managing political responses in Washington. Dr. Hall had gone completely silent, his earlier bureaucratic confidence replaced by what appeared to be genuine fear. The revelation that Shepard was operating from Senate facilities meant the conspiracy extended far beyond the CIA legal counsel's office and into the heart of democratic institutions. Rebecca was cross-referencing the voice recordings with her 7 years of investigation notes, looking for patterns that might identify Shepard's real identity. I've heard this voice before. During my FOIA litigation, I had several phone conversations with congressional staff about Noah's case. Someone was always providing information that seemed helpful, but actually steered my investigation away from productive leads. She pulled out transcripts of recorded phone calls, comparing them to Oliver's intercepted communications. The vocal patterns match. Shepard has been manipulating my investigation for years, making sure I focused on low-level operatives, while the real leadership remained protected. The tactical situation was evolving rapidly as congressional investigators established secure communications with Justice Department prosecutors and FBI agents who weren't compromised by the conspiracy. But the revelation that Shepard operated from Senate facilities meant they couldn't trust normal oversight channels. Senator Pierce was coordinating with House Intelligence Committee leadership, trying to establish independent oversight mechanisms that couldn't be manipulated by whoever was operating under the Shepard code name. We need to isolate the investigation from anyone with access to Senate Intelligence Committee communications until we can identify the source of the compromise. Through Oliver's monitoring, they could hear Shepard's growing desperation as the operational situation deteriorated. Congressional protection for the witnesses meant that normal elimination protocols couldn't be implemented, while media coverage made violent solutions politically impossible. "All units, implement Protocol 7 immediately," Shepard's voice commanded with obvious urgency. "Full spectrum containment is authorized. Eliminate all witnesses and evidence before congressional investigation can be completed." Captain Rao was already moving to protect the civilians, her transformation from assassin to protector complete. Protocol 7 means they're abandoning operational security in favor of immediate results. They're going to try to kill everyone who's seen Noah's evidence, regardless of political consequences. But Oliver's technical skills provided them with an unexpected advantage. I've been recording all of Shepard's communications for the past 6 hours. We have documentary evidence of orders to eliminate congressional investigators, obstruct federal oversight, and murder American citizens. Even if they destroy Noah's original evidence, we can prove the conspiracy through their own communications. The recordings were devastating proof that the cover-up extended to the highest levels of government, involving people with authority to coordinate between intelligence agencies and congressional oversight. But they also revealed the desperation of officials who were watching 7 years of careful concealment unravel in real time. Senator Pierce was listening to the recordings with the grim expression of someone who'd spent decades fighting institutional corruption, but had never encountered anything this comprehensive. These communications constitute evidence of treason. Whoever is operating as Shepard has violated their oath of office and betrayed the fundamental principles of democratic government. Dr. Hall finally broke his silence, recognizing that his legal expertise might be the only thing that could save him from criminal prosecution. "Senator, I want to cooperate fully with your investigation. The Shepard identity has been compartmentalized beyond my clearance level, but I can provide information about the operational structure and authorization procedures." It was the breakthrough Rebecca had been hoping for, confirmation that even senior CIA officials were being manipulated by someone with authority beyond normal intelligence hierarchy. "Dr. Hall," she said with controlled fury, "you authorized my brother's murder. You created the fake psychological evaluation. You coordinated with Helios Defense, and you spent 7 years covering up the evidence. Why should we believe anything you say now?" Hall's response reflected the desperation of someone who'd realized that his carefully constructed legal defenses were crumbling under the weight of documentary evidence. "Miss Beckett, I believed I was following lawful orders from someone with proper authority. The Shepard identity was presented to me as representing the highest levels of executive branch authorization for counterintelligence operations. What highest levels? Senator Pierce demanded. Who convinced you that murdering American citizens was legal? I was told that Shepard reported directly to the National Security Council and had presidential authorization for extraordinary measures to protect critical intelligence programs. I was assured that all operations had been reviewed by White House counsel and approved through proper channels. The implications were staggering. If Hall was telling the truth, then the conspiracy to murder Noah and cover up Project Chiaroscuro might extend to the White House itself. But it also suggested that even senior intelligence officials were being deceived about the source of their authority. Oliver's radio crackled with new transmissions that revealed how quickly the situation was escalating beyond anyone's ability to control. Mom, Shepard is coordinating with multiple agencies to implement something called Scorched Earth Protocol. It sounds like they're planning to destroy all evidence and eliminate all witnesses, regardless of political consequences. Captain Rao was coordinating defensive positions with the Congressional Security Detail, her tactical expertise providing crucial protection for the witnesses and evidence. Scorched Earth means they've abandoned any hope of containing this quietly. They're going to try to end it through overwhelming force, then blame the violence on terrorist attacks or foreign intervention. But Rebecca's 7-year investigation was about to provide the final piece of the puzzle. She'd been studying congressional records and staff assignments, looking for patterns that might connect to the Shepard identity. I think I know who Shepard is, she said with dawning realization. Someone who's had access to Senate Intelligence Committee facilities for years, who could coordinate between agencies and congressional oversight, who would have known about Noah's investigation from the beginning. She pulled out organizational charts and security clearance records that she'd obtained through years of FOIA litigation. The timing matches perfectly. Shepard's communications began immediately after Noah filed his first report about Project Chiaroscuro. Someone with access to congressional oversight was able to intercept his evidence and coordinate the cover-up. Senator Pierce was studying the records with growing recognition and what appeared to be personal betrayal. If you're right about this, then someone I've worked with for years has been systematically undermining congressional oversight while pretending to support intelligence reform. The revelation that would finally solve Noah Beckett's murder was emerging from 7 years of patient investigation, documentary evidence preserved in orbit, and the moral courage of people who'd chosen conscience over career. But it would require surviving the next few hours while Shepard implemented desperate measures to prevent the truth from reaching the American people. Standing in her farmhouse with congressional investigators, a repentant assassin, and evidence that could reshape American democracy, Elise realized they were witnessing the final chapter of Noah's investigation, a 7-year journey from whistleblower to victim to posthumous prosecutor that was about to deliver justice for crimes that powerful people had believed were buried forever. The confrontation that would finally solve Noah Beckett's murder began with a phone call that Senator Pierce received at precisely 3:47 p.m. The caller identified himself as the Director of National Intelligence, requesting an immediate private consultation about the national security implications of the ongoing investigation. But Oliver's radio monitoring revealed the truth. The call was being placed from Senate Intelligence Committee offices using official DNI communication channels that had been compromised. Senator Pierce, the voice said with practiced authority, I need you to understand the broader implications of the materials you've recovered. Some operations require extraordinary measures to protect sources and methods that took decades to develop. Pierce activated the speakerphone so everyone could hear the conversation, while Oliver recorded it for evidence. Mr. Director, I'm looking at documentary proof that intelligence agencies have been murdering American citizens to cover up illegal surveillance programs. What sources and methods justify that? Senator, you're viewing isolated incidents through the lens of civilian oversight, But intelligence operations involve complexities that require specialized knowledge to understand properly. It was the same bureaucratic language that Hall had used, the same appeal to specialized authority that had justified 7 years of cover-up. But Rebecca recognized something more specific in the voice: inflection patterns and speech rhythms that matched conversations she'd had during her investigation. "That's not the DNI," she said with growing certainty. "I've heard that voice before, during my FOIA litigation. Someone who claimed to be helping my investigation while actually steering it away from productive leads." Oliver's technical analysis confirmed her suspicion. "Mom, the call is being routed through Senate Intelligence Committee facilities, but the voice pattern analysis matches recordings I have from someone identified as Deputy Director Morrison during congressional hearings last year." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Deputy Director Morrison, a senior staff member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who'd had access to all oversight communications for the past decade, someone who could intercept congressional inquiries, coordinate with intelligence agencies, and protect illegal operations from legislative scrutiny. Senator Pierce's face went ashen as she processed the implications. "Morrison has been my deputy director for 8 years. He's had access to every classified briefing, every oversight report, every congressional inquiry about intelligence operations." Rebecca was already pulling Morrison's photograph from her investigation files, comparing it to surveillance images she'd collected over the years. "He's the one who provided me with information about Noah's case that seemed helpful, but actually misdirected my investigation. He's been controlling the narrative for 7 years, making sure the truth never reached congressional oversight." The revelation transformed their understanding of Noah's murder from a CIA cover-up to a broader conspiracy involving congressional corruption. Morrison hadn't just been protecting intelligence operations. He'd been subverting the democratic institutions designed to oversee them. Captain Rao was studying tactical communications with professional analysis, her military experience providing insights into Morrison's operational methods. The coordination patterns make sense now. He could use his congressional access to monitor oversight activities while simultaneously coordinating with intelligence agencies to frustrate those same oversight efforts. Dr. Hall was listening to the phone conversation with what appeared to be genuine shock. "Morrison briefed me on congressional oversight requirements for sensitive operations. He assured me that Senate Intelligence Committee leadership had been notified about extraordinary measures and had provided tacit approval." "What extraordinary measures?" Senator Pierce demanded, her voice carrying years of accumulated fury about being deceived by her own staff. Hall's response revealed the systematic deception that had enabled Morrison to operate for years without detection. "Morrison told me that Senate leadership understood the need for aggressive counterintelligence measures against domestic threats. He said that formal notification wasn't possible due to security concerns, but that congressional leaders had been privately briefed and had indicated their support. It was a masterpiece of institutional manipulation, using congressional authority to justify intelligence operations while simultaneously using intelligence classification to avoid congressional oversight. Morrison had created a closed loop of authorization that answered to no democratic institution. The phone conversation continued with Morrison's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control of the situation. "Senator Pierce, you need to understand that some of the people you're protecting may have connections to hostile foreign intelligence services. The operations you're investigating were designed to protect national security against sophisticated threats." "What foreign intelligence services?" Pierce demanded. "Noah Beckett was a CIA analyst trying to expose illegal domestic surveillance. Rebecca Beckett is a journalist investigating her brother's murder. What national security threat do they represent?" Morrison's response revealed the paranoid worldview that had justified years of illegal operations. "Senator, intelligence operations involve threats that can't be fully explained through normal briefing channels. Some people who appear to be whistleblowers are actually foreign agents, using American democratic processes to expose sensitive programs. Rebecca had heard enough. "Morrison, I know who you are. I know you've been manipulating my investigation for 7 years, and I know you ordered my brother's murder to protect your illegal surveillance programs." The silence on the phone stretched for several seconds before Morrison's voice returned, stripped of its bureaucratic authority and revealing the desperate calculations of someone whose cover had been blown. "Miss Beckett, you don't understand the complexities involved in protecting American national security interests. I understand that you're a traitor who's been subverting congressional oversight while ordering the assassination of American citizens," Rebecca replied with 7 years of accumulated fury. "I understand that you murdered my brother to protect illegal programs that violated the Constitution he died trying to defend." Oliver's radio monitoring revealed that Morrison's communications with field operatives had shifted to emergency frequencies, confirming that he was indeed Shepard and was coordinating final attempts to eliminate witnesses and evidence. "All units, implement scorched earth immediately," Morrison's voice commanded through encrypted channels. "Congressional protection is compromised. Eliminate all witnesses and destroy all evidence. This is a direct order from the highest authority." Captain Rao was already coordinating defensive measures with congressional security personnel, her transformation from assassin to protector, providing crucial tactical expertise. "Morrison is abandoning operational security. He's going to try to end this through overwhelming force, then claim the violence was caused by foreign terrorists or domestic extremists." But Senator Pierce had one final card to play. During her years of intelligence oversight, she'd developed relationships with Justice Department prosecutors and FBI investigators who specialized in government corruption cases. Her secure communications were already coordinating with federal agents who could act independently of intelligence community influence. "Morrison," she said into the phone, with the quiet authority of someone who'd finally gained the upper hand. "You're under investigation by federal prosecutors for conspiracy, murder, obstruction of justice, and treason. I strongly advise you to surrender yourself to FBI custody immediately." The response came not through the phone, but through Oliver's radio monitoring, Morrison's panicked communications with operatives who were being ordered to implement increasingly desperate measures. "All units, abort all operations immediately," came a new voice with federal authority. "This is FBI Special Agent Rodriguez. Deputy Director Morrison is under arrest for conspiracy and murder. Any personnel following his orders will be considered accomplices to federal crimes." The machinery of justice was finally engaging with the conspiracy that had protected Noah's killers for 7 years. FBI agents were moving to arrest Morrison. Federal prosecutors were preparing criminal charges, and congressional investigators were securing evidence that would lead to the most comprehensive intelligence reform since the Church Committee. But even as victory became certain, Rebecca felt the weight of 7 years settling on her shoulders. The truth about Noah's murder had finally been exposed. His killers would face justice, and the surveillance programs he'd died trying to expose would be terminated. But Noah himself was still gone, still buried in some unmarked grave, still denied the recognition he deserved for his sacrifice. "We found out what happened to him," she said quietly to Elise, "but we still don't know where he is." Captain Rao's response carried the weight of someone seeking redemption for unforgivable acts. "Miss Beckett, I can help you with that. I know where your brother's body is buried, and I know how much he suffered before he died, trying to protect the evidence that finally brought us all to justice." Standing in an Oregon farmhouse with Noah's evidence scattered across the table and his killer finally ready to confess, Rebecca realized that her 7-year search was entering its final phase. The truth about Noah's disappearance had been exposed, but the full story of his courage and sacrifice was still waiting to be told. The final confrontation took place not in violence or dramatic showdown, but in the quiet authority of democratic institutions finally asserting themselves against the machinery of official murder. At 4:23 p.m. Pacific Time, FBI agents arrested Deputy Director Morrison in his Senate Intelligence Committee office while he was coordinating what he believed would be the final elimination of witnesses to his crimes. The arrest was broadcast live on national television, showing a man who'd spent 8 years subverting congressional oversight, being led away in handcuffs while congressional investigators secured his files and communications equipment. But for Rebecca, the most important moment came when Captain Rao began her confession about Noah's final hours. "Your brother was held for 3 days before they killed him," Rao said with the flat professionalism of someone reciting military after-action reports. Morrison wanted him interrogated about who else knew about Project Chiaroscuro and whether he'd shared information with foreign intelligence services. Rebecca felt 7 years of grief crystallizing into something harder and more focused. "Where did you hold him?" "A Helios defense facility in rural Virginia, about 40 miles from Langley. It was designed to look like a psychiatric evaluation center, which provided cover for the fake medical examination Morrison had ordered." The systematic nature of the deception was breathtaking. Morrison had created an entire infrastructure for eliminating threats to illegal surveillance programs, complete with fake medical facilities and psychiatric evaluations that provided legal cover for kidnapping and murder. "Noah never broke," Rao continued, her voice carrying what sounded like genuine respect for her victim's courage. 3 days of interrogation, and he never gave them the information they wanted. He never identified his sources, never revealed his methods, never provided access to the evidence he'd hidden. She paused, studying Rebecca's face as if trying to gauge how much truth the sister could handle. "He talked about you constantly, said you were the smartest person he knew, said you'd never stop looking for answers if something happened to him. He made me promise that if I ever had the chance, I'd tell you how much he loved you and how proud he was of your work as a journalist." The words hit Rebecca like physical blows, 7 years of grief and determination, culminating in the testimony of the person who'd murdered her brother. "What did you tell him about why you were doing this?" "I told him what Morrison had told me, that he was a foreign agent who'd compromised sensitive operations, that his elimination was necessary to protect national security and save American lives." Rao's expression reflected the moral awakening that had been building since she'd seen Noah's evidence. "I believed it completely. Morrison had provided documentation showing connections to hostile intelligence services, communications that appeared to prove Noah was working for foreign governments. All fabricated," Rebecca said with bitter understanding. "All fabricated," Rao confirmed. Morrison had used his congressional access to create false intelligence reports that made Noah appear to be a traitor rather than a whistleblower. The same access that allowed him to intercept congressional oversight also allowed him to manufacture evidence that justified eliminating threats to his operations. Senator Pierce was documenting Rao's confession with the methodical precision of someone who understood its historical importance. "Captain, we need specific details about Morrison's authorization procedures and operational methods. How did he convince you that civilian murder was legal?" Rao's response revealed the bureaucratic mechanisms that had enabled systematic assassination of American citizens. Morrison provided what appeared to be presidential findings, authorizing extraordinary measures against domestic threats to national security. He showed me classified legal opinions from White House counsel, justifying the use of private contractors for operations that were too sensitive for regular intelligence agencies. "All forged," Dr. Hall interjected with professional recognition. Morrison used his access to congressional intelligence briefings to create convincing forgeries of executive branch authorizations. He was essentially authorizing his own operations using stolen letterhead and fabricated legal opinions. The scope of Morrison's deception was becoming clear: a decade-long operation to subvert both congressional oversight and executive authority, creating an autonomous assassination program that answered to no democratic institution. But Rebecca's focus remained on her brother's final moments. How did Noah die? Rao's response came after a long pause, her military bearing unable to completely mask what appeared to be genuine remorse. Morrison ordered what he called enhanced interrogation to break Noah's resistance. When that failed, he authorized termination through simulated suicide. Noah was drugged and staged to appear to have taken his own life due to psychological breakdown. Where is his body? Buried in an unmarked grave on Helios Defense property in Virginia. Morrison insisted on concealment rather than disposal because he wanted the option of producing remains if questions were asked about Noah's disappearance. The information provided the closure Rebecca had been seeking for 7 years, but it also revealed the calculating cruelty of people who'd not only murdered her brother, but had denied him the dignity of proper burial. Oliver's radio monitoring revealed that the broader investigation was expanding rapidly. Justice Department prosecutors were coordinating with FBI agents to arrest other conspirators, while congressional investigators were securing evidence that would lead to comprehensive intelligence reform. "Mom," he reported, "they're arresting people across multiple agencies. CIA personnel, NSA officials, FBI agents, private contractors. Everyone connected to Morrison's operations is being taken into custody." The machinery of accountability was finally engaging with crimes that had been protected by classification and compartmentalization for 7 years. But Rebecca understood that the real victory wasn't just prosecuting the guilty. It was ensuring that Noah's sacrifice led to meaningful reform. "Senator Pierce," she said, "what happens now? How do we make sure that Noah's death leads to changes that prevent this from happening again?" Pierce's response reflected decades of experience with intelligence oversight and institutional reform. "The evidence your brother preserved will lead to the most comprehensive intelligence reform since the 1970s. Every surveillance program will be reviewed. Every covert operation will be subjected to congressional oversight. And every intelligence official will be held accountable to democratic institutions." She paused, studying Noah's documents with something approaching reverence. "But more importantly, his courage will be remembered. The American people will know that their democracy survived because a CIA analyst was willing to die rather than allow his government to spy on its own citizens without legal authority." Captain Rao was coordinating with FBI agents to provide full cooperation with the criminal investigation. Her transformation from assassin to witness marking the final collapse of Morrison's conspiracy. "Miss Beckett, I know this doesn't compensate for what I did to your brother, but I'm prepared to testify about every aspect of these operations. Morrison's entire network will be exposed." Through the window, they could see news crews documenting what was becoming one of the most significant government accountability moments in American history. The satellite crash that had seemed like cosmic accident was revealing itself as something far more profound. The moment when democracy proved it could hold its own institutions accountable, even when those institutions included murder and treason. But for Rebecca, the most important outcome was simpler and more personal. "When can I bring Noah home?" "FBI agents are already coordinating with Virginia authorities to recover your brother's remains," Senator Pierce replied. "He'll finally receive the recognition and burial he deserves." Standing in an Oregon farmhouse where Noah's evidence had finally reached the people who could demand justice, Rebecca realized that her 7-year search was ending where it had begun, with a sister's love for her brother and a determination to ensure that his sacrifice had meaning. The truth about Noah Beckett's disappearance had been more terrible than she'd imagined, but his courage had been greater than she'd dared to hope. He died protecting evidence that would eventually expose the people who'd killed him, reform the institutions that had failed him, and vindicate the principles he'd given his life to defend. 6 months after the satellite crash that had changed everything, Rebecca stood beside her brother's grave in Arlington National Cemetery, watching the honor guard fold the American flag that had draped his coffin. The CIA had posthumously awarded Noah the Intelligence Star for exceptional courage in the face of mortal danger, while Congress had named the intelligence reform legislation in his honor. But for Rebecca, the most meaningful recognition was simpler. Noah was finally home. The congressional hearings had lasted 4 months, exposing the full scope of Morrison's assassination program and leading to criminal prosecutions that would continue for years. 17 intelligence officials had been indicted for conspiracy and murder, while comprehensive reforms had restructured oversight mechanisms to prevent future abuses. Captain Rao had received immunity in exchange for her testimony, using her knowledge of illegal operations to help prosecutors build cases against the remaining conspirators. Dr. Marcus Hall was serving 25 years in federal prison for his role in authorizing the murders, while Morrison himself faced multiple life sentences for treason, conspiracy, and the systematic elimination of American citizens. The Helios Defense Corporation had been dissolved, its assets seized under federal racketeering statutes. But the most profound change was cultural rather than legal. Noah's story had captured national attention in ways that transformed public understanding of intelligence operations and democratic accountability. The image of a CIA analyst willing to die rather than allow his government to spy on its own citizens had become a symbol of courage that inspired a new generation of whistleblowers and oversight advocates. Elise and Oliver had traveled from Oregon for the funeral, their lives forever changed by their brief encounter with Noah's evidence. The Navarro farm had become a pilgrimage site for journalists, academics, and government reform advocates, while Oliver's technical skills had earned him admission to MIT, the same institution where Noah had studied before joining the CIA. "He would have been proud of what you accomplished," Elise said to Rebecca as they walked away from the gravesite. 7 years of investigation, and you never gave up hope that the truth would surface. Rebecca's response carried the weight of a quest that had finally reached its conclusion. Noah always said that secrets were like radioactive materials. They had a half-life, and eventually they'd decay enough to become detectable. I just had to keep looking until the decay reached critical mass. The satellite crash had provided that critical mass, transforming isolated evidence into comprehensive exposure of systematic crimes. But Rebecca understood that her real victory wasn't just solving Noah's murder. It was ensuring that his sacrifice led to meaningful reform. The Intelligence Accountability Act had passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, creating the most comprehensive oversight mechanisms in American history. Every surveillance program required congressional approval. Every covert operation was subject to Inspector General review, and every intelligence official was held accountable to democratic institutions through enforceable legal standards. Captain Rao approached them as they left the cemetery, her presence a reminder of the moral transformations that Noah's evidence had triggered. She'd spent 6 months providing testimony that had dismantled Morrison's entire network, her cooperation leading to the prosecution of dozens of officials who'd participated in illegal operations. "Miss Beckett," Rao said with the respectful bearing of someone seeking redemption for unforgivable acts, "I wanted you to know that the Noah Beckett Foundation has received its federal charter. The organization will provide legal protection and financial support for intelligence community whistleblowers who expose government wrongdoing." It was Rebecca's way of ensuring that Noah's sacrifice continued to protect others who faced the same choice he'd confronted, remaining silent about constitutional violations or risking everything to expose the truth. The foundation would provide the institutional support that might have saved Noah's life if it had existed in 1990. "The first recipient is already being processed," Rao continued. "An NSA analyst who's discovered domestic surveillance programs that weren't terminated by the intelligence reform legislation. She'll receive legal representation, financial support, and physical protection, while congressional investigators review her evidence." Rebecca felt a surge of satisfaction that transcended her personal grief. Noah's death was generating the kind of systematic reform that would protect future whistleblowers and strengthen democratic oversight of intelligence operations. Oliver was documenting the ceremony with the same technical precision he'd apply to intercepting government communications 6 months earlier. But his focus had shifted from electronics to journalism. Inspired by Noah's courage, he'd decided to study investigative reporting rather than engineering. "Rebecca," he said, showing her footage he'd captured of the honor guard ceremony, "I want to make a documentary about Noah's investigation. Not just the satellite crash and the congressional hearings, but the full story of what he discovered and why he was willing to die for it." The documentary would complete the transformation of Noah from anonymous victim to national symbol, ensuring that future generations understood the price of democratic accountability and the courage required to protect constitutional government. Senator Pierce joined them as they walked toward the parking area, her presence reflecting the ongoing congressional commitment to intelligence reform. She'd spent 6 months conducting hearings that had exposed systematic violations, extending far beyond Project Chiaroscuro, leading to reforms that restructured the entire relationship between intelligence agencies and democratic oversight. "The final intelligence reform package will be signed next week," she reported. "Comprehensive oversight, whistleblower protection, criminal penalties for officials who obstruct congressional investigations, and mandatory declassification of programs that violate constitutional rights." But Pierce's most significant contribution was ensuring that Noah's story became part of the official congressional record. His courage and sacrifice would be preserved in government archives, studied by scholars, and remembered by future citizens who needed examples of principled resistance to institutional corruption. "There's something else," Pierce added, with the satisfaction of someone who'd fought a long battle and finally achieved victory. "The CIA is establishing the Noah Beckett Memorial Library for Intelligence Ethics. It will house copies of all documents related to his investigation, providing researchers and oversight officials with comprehensive access to evidence about government surveillance programs. The library would ensure that Noah's evidence remained available to future investigators, preventing the kind of systematic cover-up that had concealed his murder for 7 years. His final report would become required reading for intelligence officials, a reminder of the constitutional principles they were sworn to defend. Dr. Hall's cooperation from federal prison had provided additional details about Morrison's network, leading to reforms that addressed the bureaucratic mechanisms that had enabled systematic assassination of American citizens. His testimony had revealed how congressional access could be subverted to authorize illegal operations, leading to security protocols that prevented future abuse of oversight authorities. But the most profound change was reflected in the faces of intelligence community personnel who'd attended Noah's funeral. Dozens of CIA analysts, NSA technicians, FBI agents, and military intelligence officers had come to pay respect to a colleague whose courage had transformed their understanding of duty and honor. "He's become a legend within the community," one young CIA analyst told Rebecca after the ceremony. "Someone who proves that loyalty to the Constitution matters more than loyalty to institutions." Every new analyst studies his case as an example of moral courage under impossible circumstances. The transformation of Noah from murder victim to moral exemplar represented the kind of cultural change that ensured lasting reform. Intelligence officials now understood that exposing constitutional violations was heroic rather than treasonous, while congressional oversight was strengthened by public recognition of its importance. As they drove away from Arlington National Cemetery, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 7 years of investigation, months of danger, the transformation of enemies into allies, and the gradual emergence of truth from the shadows of government secrecy. The satellite crash had been more than cosmic accident. It had been Noah's final gift to a sister who'd never stopped searching, and a democracy that had nearly lost its way. His evidence had survived 7 years in orbit, waiting for the right moment to fall back to earth and deliver justice for crimes that powerful people had believed were buried forever. But Rebecca understood that the real victory wasn't just exposing the conspiracy or prosecuting the guilty. It was ensuring that Noah's sacrifice strengthened the democratic institutions he died trying to protect. The intelligence community was now subject to meaningful oversight. Whistleblowers had legal protection, and the American people understood the price of constitutional government. Standing in the Oregon wheat field where the satellite had crashed, 6 months after the confrontation that had changed everything, she realized that some harvests were worth waiting for, no matter how long they took to ripen. Noah's evidence had finally borne fruit, yielding justice for the dead and protection for the living. The cycle of farming continued around them, planting, growing, harvesting, renewal. But the seed of accountability that had been preserved in space and delivered by cosmic mechanics would yield a different kind of harvest, measured in constitutional protections restored, democratic institutions strengthened, and a government reminded that it served the people rather than the other way around. Noah Beckett had vanished into darkness 7 years earlier, but his light had finally pierced the shadows that had concealed his fate. And in that light, American democracy had found the strength to confront its own failures and emerge more perfect than before. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.